a few thank yous. And there it is, the recording about it. And then an opening question. I'm going to ask one, and then Clemente and Think Chinatown, our co-hosts, are going to each lead off with a question. Then we're going to open the floor, and we're going to try and get as many opportunities to ask questions as we can. So we're going to ask each person to limit themselves to 2 minutes in terms of their speaking time, so that we can share this time around with some kind of, I know there's not enough time, but share it somehow equitably. So that's the plan. And really, I'm just going to start right now by saying welcome to this network of folks. Councilmember Marte, I'm sure there's many people here you know, but we're really happy to open up a dialogue with you today. And I really want to give you kind of the opening words about yourself and your own kind of connection to arts and culture, and how you think about this work that we're all involved in.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you for everyone who helped organize this, and the moderators, and for people attending. Arts and culture, I think when you think of Lower East Side, when you think of the East Village, when you think of Chinatown, I think the first thing you think about is arts and culture and the rich history it has for a really long time. And for me personally, I always thought it was part of my life. My dad was a playwright. I see Other Electives here, and he was able to perform some of his plays and take like some classes and help people learn how to write poetry through Teatro Yati and other organizations on the Lower East Side. And the main reason he moved downtown instead of the Washington Heights area, where a lot of Dominicans were immigrating to, is because he wanted to have that exposure to arts and culture. And he's heard of the stories of the people who used to live down here, and how this community was radical, not only in its politics, but in its thinking. And he wanted to be a part of that. And so for me, it's been part of my life. It's the reason why I live downtown, why I grew up downtown. And my dad and my family has always made me sometimes be a part of that process, right? Whether it's like doing ticketing at some of his performances, or backstage work, or like listening to the auditions time and time again, because we couldn't have childcare, so sometimes just had to sit there. But then it also gave me an understanding that this should be part of everybody's life. And I think the first performance I was part of was when I was 9 years old during the Fiera Festival. I think it was the first one, probably 1996. And we had a street performance outside of Piano's Bar on Stanton and Ludlow. And they closed off the street and had a really beautiful performance. Me and both of my sisters took part of it. And that was like the first time where I was able to be part of something that was for their neighborhood and the community in general. And so that's how I see my office promoting the arts. It's like, this is a fabric of our community. This is not an extracurricular activity. This is not something extra that should be a part of our lives. This is part of our life. This is part of where we live. And that's how we have looked at it. Renee is my budget director. He's on, and he'll be able to answer some of the questions that you might have as well during the Q&A. But when we think about this, is that how do we implement, especially coming out of this pandemic where people are starving for, not only to be together, but to learn, to grow. How do we make sure that the smaller organizations have what they need to recover, to expand, and to connect with people who want to be a part of that? There's bigger, larger institutions. I always think that the mayor and the speaker can work on that, but it's the council members that work with the local organizations that do the after-school programs in our school, that offer free training and education service at nights during the weekends, that help our teenagers in partnership with other community nonprofits that kind of create a greater lifestyle and understanding of who we are and how to express our emotions and our creativity. And so I'm excited, of course, to be the council member, but specifically to see how we can continue to empower that legacy that's already here and make sure that it comes along with this kind of back to normal or NYC is back kind of slogan. It's like, who's back, right? And which organizations are back, and how do we continue to not just have them back, but grow? And we're in a really influential position to make that happen.
Sorry, I muted myself because I wanted to laugh so hard when you were talking about the lack of childcare and children hanging out rehearsals. That's very relatable in my neck of the woods. So let me just move this now to Libertad. Would you like to open with a question?
Well, hi, Councilmember Marte. We're so glad you're here, and it totally resonated with me as well. I think people that have as a childhood have a background in the arts for some reason end up in some sort of organizing, because whether it's the arts or something else, that's what it's involved, usually very scrappy kind of stuff. So my question was, on behalf of the Clemente, is that the pandemic has explicitly revealed what we already, all of us knew in the field, which is that arts and culture, like you said, are not just niceties to have, but are really the bridge to all types of health and civic engagement metrics and improvements. So we are also the storytellers of distinct communities and the neighborhoods that make New York City what it is, right? So an example was this last year, the City Artists Corp initiative. It was an unprecedented lifeline for many working artists and their communities, but so much more is needed. And that was once, a one-time deal that we got last year. The Clemente, for example, partnered with the city and spread itself really thin, actually, to showcase more than 30 artist grantees who lack venue space in one single month. So my question is, how can we help you best advocate for increased funding for arts and culture, and in particular for a new pool of funding for the Department of Cultural Affairs to be able to boost equity and the capacity of the historically underfunded arts organizations of color, and also of those that are smaller in budget size, that never got their fair share in terms of operational support for their services? Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I completely agree. Like, the support the city gave shouldn't be one time and should continue and even expand. I'm gonna start with the positive. One of the good things is that Justin Brannon, he's chair of the finance committee. And as a former musician and rock star that he understands how crucial it is. And so I spoke to him recently, and one of the fights he's gonna advocate for is to make sure that cultural institutions get funding that they need from our side of the budget, right? But there's a lot more money that can come from the cultural affairs and from the mayor's office. And I think that's gonna be, we have to organize for that. The mayor wants to have this like austerity budget that he proposed earlier last month, where he wants to do 3% cuts across the board. And that's just a wish list. That's not a final version. And I think it's pushing back on the details. And one way you push back on the details is making sure that you have a story and a pushback to all those details. So maybe we can create like a working group that will set up actions eventually to have rallies, to have petitions, especially as we get closer to when the budget get finalized, to make sure that we have the money not only there, but earmarked for these organizations. And so I think for next steps is making sure that we can identify the pots of funding that these organizations were getting most of their money from, and make sure that that funding remains.
Great. Yin.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Chris. Thanks for sharing about your dad being a playwright. I didn't know about that. That's really cool. So my question on behalf of Think Chinatown is about access and overcoming barriers, both from language and technology access. So Think Chinatown ad hoc put together a program called Assist, exclamation point, because we like exclamation points, Chinatown, where we banded together some volunteers that went and assisted arts groups that needed help applying for their LMCC grants. So for instance, the success story that we have is the Eastern American Fujianese Opera Company. As you said, like arts for them is just a way of life. It's their social group as well. They have, it's so much part of their social fabric, but they don't speak English. A lot of them are seniors. They didn't even have an email address. When we were, we had to help them create that, all of that. It was a very ad hoc kind of, we just saw that need and kind of put that together. And I'm starting to see LMCC also kind of react to it and start to augment their services to support our needs. But as our council member, I know you see the need for like bridging these language and technology access to funding. But what do you see for like the bigger picture of how, we can all play a part to helping bridge all of that?
Yeah, and I think you described it quite well, right? It's like using the strengths of all these organizations and the networks you already have, right? So when, I think Chinatown's a perfect example of how we can like use you as a partner to do outreach for that case specifically to get people to sign up for a grant, but it could be for other things, right? Like we don't know, like I don't know who's going to be excited to take a free piano class, right? But you might, right? And so I think it's whenever we talk to other organizations, making sure that we keep like this network of communication going to make sure that we reach every single population. Like, for example, we just sat down with the New York Public Library and they do amazing work at Sewer Park, at Chatham, at New Amsterdam that we weren't aware of, right? And I'm sure a lot of residents know that they can't take advantage of those like free story times or how to use a laptop and all the resources that they have. And I think there's been a divide. And I think what we're trying to do is trying to make sure that we have like a resource bank of information that whenever we meet with a group, we can say, do you think you can, communicate this to your network of people? And I think that's something we're trying to acquire now because we have to go through all these budget meetings and we learn something every single day. And so I think once we're able to have that, is not just relying on our emails because people don't look at our emails or our flyering, is using the network that's already there.
And also supporting that network.
Yeah.
Before we open up to other questions, I think I just want to do a follow-up because, in fact, it sounds, Councilmember, like there's going to be a lot of follow-up because I'm hearing working groups and networks and mutual support of different kinds. So looking forward to moving that forward. I want to acknowledge that there are many people that are in the adjoining district to yours, such as Winston here today, or us on 4th Street. But, frequently we feel as though we are serving the entire Lower East Side, right? We're engaged with the full community. So just, do you also feel good about working with other electives, to kind of, to have a network of support and advocacy going forward as well?
Yeah, definitely. And, I'm happy to meet with, I know we've already met with a lot of the organizations here, but we're happy to meet one-on-one with every other person we haven't met with, because then we get to know the scope of the work and we know like the geography of work, right? And we're happy to work with other colleagues, there's so many resources that we have as individual council members, but that can be double or triple if we get other council members on board supporting these organizations.
Right. Yay. I'm having a great time already in this meeting. Councilmember, you've been fantastic and giving us some insight here and already feeling the support. So we're going to open up to the floor. I'm going to look for hands and call them. And we are now going to, again, try and keep to our 2 minutes. So Dakota, you're gonna let people know when, if we get close to the 2-minute signal.
Actually, I'll be the time check this time.
Monty,
Yes.
Monty's gonna do it.
And I'll do a 15-second left little warning so that you know it's coming to an end.
That sounds great. So do I have any hands? No. Mark.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you, Councilmember Marte. It's good to meet you. And thank you so much for what you're doing on behalf of the Lower East Side, Chinatown, Lower Manhattan. My colleagues have already outlined some of the basic issues we face as small not-for-profits working in New York, which is that we don't really have the kind of baseline funding that really creates actual sustainability over multiple years. We're celebrating, Mark DeGarmo Dance is celebrating its 35th anniversary as a nonprofit in New York this year. And while we've been blessed with support, of course, through the Department of Cultural Affairs and our council members' offices, Borough President's office, the one thing I felt that the COVID pandemic brought out to me was that despite all these relief sources, and we did avail ourselves of some very modest sources that were highly, highly competitive, for example, through the NEA, through the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation, we were one of 6% of applicants in the Mid-Atlantic region and the Virgin Islands that got $10,000 of funding. You know, it wasn't enough to keep us going. We were lucky to have it. It was a kudos to the kind of work we do in the city of New York, particularly with the Department of Education. So I have that as one thought, just I'm not sure it's a question. I guess it's how can we create avenues for additional kinds of support that we've never seen in this country before. And New York is a leader for the United States in so many ways. The other area, the other area is the Department of Education. And are there ways to boost the, like going back to the per capita funding that existed with Project Arts like 15 years ago, before the 2007 and 8 crash, when schools seemed to suddenly have no budget for arts education at all again. So those are just two areas of requests to explore. And thank you so much to my colleagues for making today's conversation possible and for you being here, Council Member.
Thank you, Mark. And to the second question that you asked, I think there was a resolution that will be introduced in the next stated meeting to make sure that schools have that funding. So I can share that information once it gets introduced, and we can all advocate it, right? If we need to write a letter together, petition, we can make sure that we can make it happen. You know, for baseline funding, a lot of it is through the mayor's office. It's a trickier space to figure out, especially with a new administration, with a lot of new staffers. I think it's kind of, for us, is figuring out who's the best person in that team to apply the pressure to make something like that happen. So I don't have an answer for you right now, just because I think they are still figuring it out, right? And who will be the right deputy mayor to approach, the right chief of staff to that deputy mayor to say, hey, can you do this? The same way they did it for pantry, for the pantry system during the pandemic, where some of them, now it's a baseline for some organizations. How do we figure out how to do that with this new administration to create a baseline for cultural funding for smaller organizations too?
If I can chime in quickly, since the pandemic, there's the Culture of Three advocacy that has happened, and maybe you can join one day, but a lot of it has been regarding this matter has to do with expanding the budget of the Department of Cultural Affairs so they can begin to provide, rather than just programmatic funding, to begin to provide operational funding to other groups that are not what they call the CIGs. The CIGs are the big institutions, right? So to smaller organizations and POC organizations. So that's how we've distilled the ask is, can you expand the pot of DCLA so we can add a culture, an equity and capacity fund that would address precisely that.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Any hands? Oh, am I seeing you, Stephen? Yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm Stephen Englander, the director of ABC No Rio, Councilmember Marte. Congratulations on joining the council.
Thank you.
In particular, ABC No Rio has been working with the Department of Cultural Affairs and EDC on building a new facility for our projects, programs, and operations on Rivington Street. Among a number of challenges, COVID and related budget impacts have sort of delayed our project. In general, we will be submitting a request to your office within the next week or so for capital support. But in general, I was hoping that you could describe for us today what your approach to capital investment for cultural organizations in our community might be.
It really depends on the size of the ask, to be honest. I have a meeting. This is for everyone to, if you can send me an email. I have a meeting with Mark Levine about capital projects because his funds of money is a lot more than what we have in the council. And so especially for some of these bigger items, please send them to me so I can bring them up to him. He doesn't really know Lower Manhattan as well as the last borough president. He's new, just like myself. And so if we can make those asks on your behalf, we're happy to do that. For us, we're going to figure out how much interest we get first. To be honest, we haven't gotten many capital requests to our office. I think Renee can correct me if I'm wrong, but we got probably less than a dozen so far. And so we're going to base it off that and figure out what's the need based on the submissions that we received. Of course, we received a lot of expense funding requests, as always, but for the capital is different. I think it's seeing what those needs are and then figuring out what we can do now or what can wait, depending on what the ask is.
A quick follow-up. I see Renee put his contact information in the chat. And Renee, would you be the person that I reach out to with further details about our request and ABC No Rio in general?
Yes, sir. So I'll be the person that you can reach out to. We can set up a meeting regarding capital funding. Right now, with discretionary, it's a little bit difficult just because we have to submit the first round of submissions from our office, I think the end of this week. And so that might be a little bit difficult, but I think the thing that's most important is to set up a meeting with us immediately if you are looking for capital funding, because again, most of the projects that I guess in general are funded are city sort of city entities like parks or NYCHA buildings, things like that, because they don't have to submit a so to speak application, whereas organizations, CBOs, will have to submit this really long sort of arduous application, unfortunately. And so the most important thing is to get that done before the 24th of March on Cap Grant, so you guys can go ahead and make sure it's in the system, and then again follow up with me once I put my email in the chat, and then we can set up some sort of meeting so you can discuss with me and the councilman or anyone else on our staff the intricacies of your capital project.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And be in touch.
I have a follow-up on this. I also want to say that the number of applications may not actually reflect need, because as Renee just pointed out, yes, the application is very onerous, but also the procurement process for using the capital funds is also quite onerous.
Yeah.
So like we, for instance, took a look at it and we decided it was way too too complicated to go for that. It would just be easier to fundraise rather than put us through the torture of this capital grant. So I just want to make sure it doesn't mean we don't need it. It's just the application is too administratively taxing.
Yeah, and what we're planning to do, just because the budget just came really quickly, what what we want to do later in the year is have like Zoom meetings where we could help people with their application process and maybe have like a 101, a 201 session. So then next year funding can hopefully be easier for, these smaller organizations, but for also like individual people, right? Sometimes these organizations only have one staffer, right? And they can't become a budget application expert or grant writer overnight. And so we want to do that later in the year.
But I want to just point out the capital funding one, it's not just the application, it's actually how you use it. So it only works if your budget, you're applying for something really, really big. So it kind of only works for really large organizations. And so maybe like thinking about like a re-granting program for smaller amounts of capital funding might be more useful for organizations like our size of people on the call here.
Okay.
There's a minimum capital grant of 500,000. So.
No, the minimum capital grant would be 50,000. So the floor for capital for any sort of capital project, it has to be at least $50,000. That's changed over the years, but for fiscal year of 2023, it's $50,000 is the minimum. And with any other, and this is definitely a good point to make, and I know it was made during our orientation, but for any sort of capital project that is not over $50,000, those, and it's a very tight sort of criteria that you have to make, but those can actually be listed in member items if there are certain conditions met. And of course, that would involve me having to talk to City Council Finance, making sure that everything is, according to plan. But generally, yes, the minimum for capital funding is $50,000. And to Yin's point, I have heard from organizations that are quite frustrated with that because, again, a lot of the organizations that do get capital funding that are not city oriented, unfortunately, do not have the capacity to spend that money or the capacity to kind of back that money up or any sort of project that is more than $50,000. So thank you for bringing that up. That's something that we can definitely take note of. And I would just echo the councilman's point that hopefully in the next year, now that we're on our feet, we can make this an even more seamless process. And we know that there are some barriers to accessibility, and we're taking note of those.
I just want to add, Renee, maybe we should define the type of capital project, because if it's a building capital project, it has to be 500,000. We've been getting that repeatedly over the past 10 years for my building. So I believe that there may be equipment or different kinds of capital projects, but they have different kinds of caps.
Okay, and I can check that real quick right now. Thank you for.
Great. Do we have another question on the floor? Yes, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm David Pushkin. I have a studio on the 4th floor. Councilmember Marte, it's nice to meet you. Thank you. It's an honor. I just wanted to put together what Libertad mentioned with what's just been stated, because of course I'm not a professional fundraiser or work with the mayor's office, but thinking about what you said, council member, about the mayor having a kind of streamlined emergency budget and finding a way to dovetail that with what Libertad said about creating a maybe expanding DCLA under that budget somehow. And you had mentioned that, it's going to take you a while to figure out who the right people in the office to go to are, but can you give us an example of what that landscape kind of looks like?
Yeah, so even the mayor is still making his appointment for commissioners to these agencies. And so there really isn't like a point person that can call up or text and say, what do you think of this? Or arrange a meeting for us to have with them. And so that's why it's been kind of like, at least on the in the administration side, really hard to kind of like pinpoint who's the person to like reach out to. And if we reach out to the interim commissioner, does the information we give to them, does it carry over, right? And so because of the timeline with appointments and how they are in correlation with the budget and when we need to make these requests or when we make some of these demands don't line up as we all want them to. And
Right.
so for us, it's just making sure that we can reach the right person that's going to be on that team for not just for this year, but for next year, to make sure that if we can't get it in this budget cycle, that we know who to organize around and work with for the next budget cycle.
Or even what I was thinking is even beyond this mayor, you know, I mean, being able to really put something into place in New York, because every other place around the country seems to be losing it. And, you know, recovering from COVID, we need to be able to set that kind of high example where cultural funding is a necessity, not just an add-on.
Yeah, and one thing that I was told by council finance staff is that once we get something as a baseline funding, it's really hard to eliminate it.
Well, that's
So the goal is to like make sure that we can get it within this administration as quickly as possible, so then it just carries on for future administrations.
If I just wanted to add one more thing, which is just to suggest, which I'm sure you'll do anyway, but if that's the plan, really some kind of solid assessment, so that you can really, you know, say, look at how this worked, even when we had no money, even when we were just trying to build back after COVID. Look at how this worked. We need to keep going with this. You know.
Great. I had a question that was submitted to me in advance that I'd just like to take a moment, and then Jan will go to you. The person wrote, with East River Park half closed for years to come, and soon more of the Esplanade to the south to be closed intermittently. I wonder how many District 1/CB3 residents know that there's a great green space for free cultural exhibits and activities a short ferry away. How will the council member help constituents make Governor's Island their own country place in the city? For example, promote the free ferry at South Street, host an island tour in appropriate languages, announce events or openings, or host a community picnic there.
Yeah, and you know, I think we've been a part of that push to make the ferry, you know, have a ferry access point not only at Coraliers, but make it 7 days a week, and continue with some of, you know, the free ridership for a certain age for people who live in public housing. And I think there's a few more criterias that can give you a free ride to Governor's Island. And we've actually talked to the trust to figure out which nonprofits should showcase there. So we're constantly talking to them. And once we figure out like a schedule of what their entertainment program is, especially for the spring and summer, we're going to help promote it, whether it's through our, you know, bi-weekly newsletter, but also in our physical newsletter that we send out as an office, to make sure that people are aware of it and can use it, because it is a beautiful space. And now that it's open year round, I feel like a lot more people will create a habit of visiting it, and it won't just be kind of this once in every 3-year trip to Governor's Island. Hopefully it'll be more monthly and weekly, hopefully.
Jan.
Hi, nice to meet you, council member, and Renee too. Jan Hendrik from Marte Garbo Dance, but I want to ask a slightly different question just about the Office of Arts and Special Projects at the New York City Department of Education. Who supervises them, or if it's in your bailiwick for your office to take a look at them? I'm asking because we regularly had great support from their director of dance, Ananeri Fragoso, and she left about 2 years ago to go to Hunter College, but she's still listed on the website as dance director. And we regularly get funding from the English language learners and students with disabilities programs. And we got an email from them saying, sorry, those awards have been eliminated. And Mark got a little concerned. And I said, well, the city budget has not been voted on yet. So they printed a retraction. So who's supervising the Office of Arts and Special Projects? And are they taking their legal responsibility to fulfill the requirements of the New York City Arts Education Blueprint seriously or not?
Yeah, I don't know who's the person, but send us that email and we will definitely follow up to make sure that we know who the right person to reach out to, but also to keep the program for years to come. And send us as much information as you can. You can email Renee and we'll talk about it internally of how to move forward.
Okay, thank you. We have an insider friend there who's helping us a lot, and that's good, but that information shouldn't be available to friends. It should be available to everybody. So thank you.
Other hands? Winston?
Hey guys, well, first of all, I don't have a question, but I just want to congratulate Councilmember Christopher Marte, who I've known for many years. Because like he said, his father, he has worked in the organization, he has been presented in the organization, and we're so proud of you. I remember seeing you come to the theater as a kid and watch your father do his stuff. So now seeing you here in office, it's a great moment. It's a great celebration. And I just want to congratulate you, wish you all the best. And at the same time, I want to say hello to so many familiar faces here. And that's it. Next person.
Thank you, Winston. Good
Thank
to
you.
see you too.
I'm looking for hands. I can't see everybody, but if you use the hand raise function, I'll definitely see it. Libertad, Yin, do you have anything you'd like to bring forward?
I think Wendy has her hand up.
Oh,
And that was my Governor's Island questions. And I'm also so glad that you'll meet with ABC No Rio, where I've been on the board for many years, and like everybody else, join in the congratulations. And so nice to have you in this spot, and great to meet Ryan or Ross, I'm sorry, as well. Renee, sorry. So I don't really have a question. I have a small organization, and I can see how the last couple of years, if people are out, how many people get there, how much excitement it is. So I'm hoping there's a lot more outdoor activity this year as well.
Yeah. And also, if anyone wants us to do a walkthrough of their institution or where they perform, we're happy to do that too.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
hi, Ying. Go ahead.
Hi, hi, Christopher Marte, council member. I'm Ying Yan, I'm the executive director of New York Chinese Cultural Center. Congratulations, and I look forward to working with your office in the years to come. We are pretty active in the Lower East Side and actually throughout New York City, performing and sharing Chinese arts. And COVID has been particularly tough on us, not only because it affects everyone, but also with the increase in anti-Asian violence. We have continued to support our artists with our budgets cut down tremendously, but we found it was extremely important to be out and present in the communities across New York City. We're talking about Bronx. We made it a mission to be in all 5 boroughs and throughout the tri-state area. Our performers were doing it for free, we're working late hours because it was so important to be out there. And with that backdrop though, we find that it's been, as we open up, now a lot of what we did was online. We did tons of programming online when we were sheltered in place. Now that we're opening up, our performers are going out there and performing. We performed at Columbus Park, Stewart Park, but there is a sense of fear out there, not only among our performers, but also among the audience members. They do not want to leave their homes. My performers are afraid to go on the subway. We always pair up, we always go together. Especially if they're dressed in traditional costuming, they become seen in a different light, not for who they are as people, but as symbols or Chinese dolls, So it becomes, now I find it a challenge to now perform outdoors. So I know it's a probably very particular question to our organization, but what can you do to help alleviate that fear?
Yeah, it's something we deal with in the office and we talk about every single day. Representing Chinatown, Lower East Side, which has a sizable Asian American population, of how do we lessen that fear? And I think what we talk about is like a lot of long-term solutions, but people need short-term solutions as well to have that sense of safetyness, right? There's people that are scared to go to Columbus Park, which is pretty much their living room and where they hang and socialize. And, we're not like the easy answer would say, oh, let's just get more officers on the street, but we feel like that doesn't solve the issue. And so, there are a bit more patrolling than average now, especially because the Parks Department has put that funding to help parks where a lot of Asian Americans go, whether it's Columbus Park or Saturday Roosevelt Park. But it's also, I think a lot of it has to do with what you're doing as well, right? Making sure that people understand that Asian Americans are not the other, right? They're not the source of what the former president was saying, whether it's like the flu virus or whatever, and showing that they're part of this city. And so I think your education is important, but also it's important that the people who do these performances don't feel safe to showcase that. And I think it's us giving you a safe environment to showcase that, right? Whether it's like in the chambers of City Hall, using you as for like our town hall so people can see it, so we can build that safe environment for you to showcase. And we can talk separately to figure out creative ways on how we can make it safer in our district, especially in venues that your staffers are going to, that they get that extra protection that's needed.
Thank you. I look forward to having those conversations with you.
Hands? Yin, you looked excited when I said you could ask another question.
Yeah, we had more questions. And Ying, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, my question, I was actually kind of surprised no one asked this, is about affordable art spaces in Lower East Side / Chinatown, right? That's the question I feel like everyone wants to ask, especially, with Senator Mulberry, still hasn't been so far away from being re-established as our place, our community center. That was the host. It hosted one of our only black box theaters. And do you have proposal solution up your sleeve and how to address this situation so that we can have more space to operate here in our own neighborhood?
Yeah, we actually held a roundtable with principals because a lot of these cultural events happen in their schools, and now with the mandates diminishing or eliminating fairly soon, it's going to allow them to offer their physical space to cultural institutions, to nonprofit to use, whether it's at nights and weekends for practice or performances. And we want to help with that. And so, we are constantly talking to our principals to see when it's safe for them to do so, because we want to use their buildings as well to have like monthly programming and events. And so once that happens, we'll definitely let everyone else know. But then when that is alleviated, also alleviates some of the other organizations that have physical structure, whether it's University Settlement and their theater space, right? And how many people they can hold there, Manny Cantor Center and their top floor space, and finding ways that they can offer affordable rentals for organizations. And so we'll let you know when we know, because we definitely want to use these spaces and we want to make sure that you guys can use it as well.
Yeah,
and for 70 Mulberry, you're correct. It's taking way too long. I think the last meeting we had with DCAS, they said 7 years, maybe. And we're gonna push them. We pushed them at our earlier meeting that we had with them. We said that it's unacceptable. The community already has agreed on what we want there, and they can work at a faster timeline as we see everywhere else. And why aren't they using that same sort of energy for this building, especially since the funding is already there? And so we'll keep on pushing on our end.
Thanks for that. And I do know that pre-pandemic, like a lot of opera groups in Chinatown have used like the local schools, like their assembly rooms, to host their big opera performances. but it is a little bit not the same, you know, not having the right equipment. These are high level performances. They put all year into this. These are really great, talented actors. And I feel like the facilities that we have to host them is not matching up to the caliber of art form. It's not honoring these artists appropriately. And there's a desperate need for like new spaces that are affordable. So I appreciate the use of the school, but I think we also need more.
I agree. And that's one of the challenges that we have being in such a developed area of the city, right? Like there isn't new lots that we can look at. You know, we have to wait until something is demolished so we can think about what should go there. And so, you know, there is a new performance theater that's opening up at the World Trade Center site. I'm happy to reach out to them to see if they're able to do any affordable rentals for local organizations, especially cultural organizations. So, and if you could think of other institutions that I should push
that Clemente does that, and although we're not in Chinatown, and we need certainly much more, and I'm so glad that the representation that we've gotten here in this call, a lot of them are residents of the Clemente, whether it's individual artists or small arts organizations like ABC No Rio and Mark DeGarmo. That's precisely our mission, and we're always happy to give very subsidized venue rentals to community groups, to independent producers, to other small arts organizations that are not residents of ours. That's what we do. That's part of our mission. We're very proud of that. But I want to bring something that Jean also said. It's also, how do we upgrade and maintain those publicly owned facilities? The only reason that we have this facility is because it's publicly owned. It's a government building, but it's to us to maintain that. It's to us to steward it into the future. That takes a lot of money that many times comes at the expense of the people, of the staffing that had up to very recently just gotten pay benefits because, you know, one thing has to give. And this was the year I said, no, like the staff can't keep on giving what should be basic benefits in order to support a public building, which is as important. So that's where the operations questions comes back, but definitely reach out to us. We also just got NISCA support for a rehearsals program at super subsidized rates at $10 an hour. So we're one of those organizations, and you can share and spread the word. We're here to build community and help in any way we can regarding that.
And I saw in the chat also Abrams Art Center, as we all know, it's a great theater. It's a beautiful place to be in.
Yes, and we got a lot of places up here on 4th Street that would often be excited to work with you. So those of us who are feeling lucky to have some space are often really open to finding ways to share that. We have 2 hands raised, and we're going to have to kind of be quick because I would like to give the council member the final words before we leave. So, Andrea.
Thank you. And thank you, council member, for all the information. I'll be really quick about my question. I understand, without getting into too many details, but I understand with the recent Soho NoHo rezoning, there was a provision of a Soho Arts Fund. I was just wondering if you could provide, I don't know any details. I don't know if anyone else does here. So I was just wondering if, and you might not have any, but if you have any sort of details as to what that entails, the timeline. I'm sure lots of folks here would love to hear more about it.
I wish I knew. It was one of these things that many people asked questions about: who's going to manage the fund, which agency is going to be a part of, how the money gets transferred to the fund, and a lot of questions weren't answered. We can definitely follow up with city planning to figure out how that fund is actually going to collect and disperse funds. But that fund is only receives funds through conversion. So as people make their loft apartments compliance, or once it kind of switches into being complying with the existing zoning, then the money will be transferred to that fund. So there's currently no money there. and because the rezoning just happened, and so I think there's still a lot of questions, and we don't know how they're actually going to collect. It's not like a tax fund. If it was a flip tax, whenever they sell a building, the funds will be collected through the sale and it'll sit in one place. This is actually going to be taxing current residents without doing the sale. And so we don't know what, the mechanism of that, how that's going to happen.
Thanks.
Ying.
Hi, thanks. I'll just make this quick. I wanted to emphasize Yin's point about performance space in Chinatown specifically. I appreciate everyone offering it, and I'm learning so much right now, so I will be reaching out to different people. I feel though our home, we started in Chinatown, our organization, and we want to highlight that. We want to serve that community. However, we find the challenge of, for Lunar New Year season, we had dozens and dozens of performances outside of the district. Hudson Yards, we performed the Met and Bryant Park and all these wonderful spaces. And yet sometimes people say, well, why aren't you doing more in the Chinatown here? Because there's not the spaces. So thank you all for chiming in and offering. And I just do want to reemphasize that we can do something to reinvigorate Chinatown, bring New Yorkers back to Chinatown. That would be helpful. Thank you.
And I completely agree. And I think, the CCBA theater is super outdated and it can't really be called a theater, it's more auditorium. But hopefully if we can push with 70 Mulberry, we can have it soon. And then I know Yin is exploring other places that are in limbo for potential theater locations within the Fujianese community and kind of like the East Broadway part of Chinatown.
All right, I'm going to just say, first of all, I just want to really thank Libertad and Yin. It's really great and that, you partnered in helping get the word out. I think this is a terrific showing of folks who care about arts and culture and are working in that sector here, really wanting to know more about you. And Councilmember Marte, really, really, really helpful to hear everything that you had to say today. I feel a lot more grounded and understanding of your perspective, and really appreciate the way that you are reaching out towards us to partner here. So I just wanted to give you the final words before we close up. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I just want to thank you for creating this space and participating as well. We're happy to meet with all the organizations and figure out what your needs are and what you need us to do as a council office, or what you need us to fight for on a citywide level, or even through other different funding pockets. Like, sadly, it's what the money talks, right? And it's the funds that get into these institutions, but both for construction, capital and expense, is what keeps us alive and keeps this going. And we're happy to fight for that, both on the budget cycle, but also on the legislative front, right? Like we need to make sure that we do something about our commercial rent and make sure that we can stabilize and put a cap on it, make sure that theaters of all sides are protected. And we're excited for those fights when they come up this year. And so, just don't look at us as a place where you can find funds, but use us as a resource to reach out to the greater community, to help you with different legislation and just to help you figure out city agencies. I'm sure there's folks here who have been in and out of the city for 30 or 40 years, but there's some people here who are new to this whole process, and don't be shy about it, right? There's a lot of lessons learned. There's a lot of experience that, another organization can coach you on, or we can help you figure it out. And we want to be that partner.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We did it, folks. We're finishing up with 2 minutes ahead, and I think we got everyone's question. And so this would be the beginning, though, of a relationship we all want to build with you. And I know that there's lots of us ready to step up to the various kinds of partnerships that you outlined.
Awesome. Thank you, guys, and have a great day.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
all.
Bye.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Fab team.